members of the media, if you want some more room, we have some more viewing room up there. Then also some of us who might not necessarily be needed for this meeting, we do have the viewing area, as the minister has said, up there so that we stick to our intentions. Without further ado, we have called this press briefing, as we said yesterday, for ministers to further elaborate on what the President told the nation yesterday. Without any further ado, I would then like to request the Minister of Health to start with the further elaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, colleagues, ministers, deputy ministers, and director generals, members of the media. Welcome to this press briefing. You will notice that we have a full contingent of the members of what was the Interministerial Committee, which has now been converted into the National Command Council, chaired by President Ramaphosa. Last night, President Ramaphosa made an announcement that the Covid-19 outbreak has been declared a national disaster in terms of the Disaster Management Act. And this is in recognition of its magnitude and severity in our country. Fellow South Africans, as of this morning, we have, as of yesterday, we were having 61 when the President announced. At the moment, we will talk about the 61, but I need to make you aware that we are also investigating another 4. But because of the system that we are using, we will not give you all those details right now. But amongst them are those who are being tested from private laboratories and that will be verified and validated by the National Health Laboratory Services, so that we can then be certain of the outcome. So for that reason, whilst we have 61, we will give you details of the others as soon as they are verified. And I'm only saying so because some of those are verified. You might be picking up stories about them. We just say to you, we are aware of them, but we will not announce finally until they have been verified, particularly where there have been already some media talks about them. But the numbers have increased, and the latest is that in Gauteng we've got additional 7 33-year-olds who had traveled to Spain, a 60-year-old female who had traveled to Austria, a 30-year-old male who had traveled to India, a 39-year-old who had traveled to the US, a 43-year-old female who had traveled to the US, a 50-year-old male who had traveled to France and the UK, a 37-year-old male who had traveled to the US, Dubai and Mexico. In the Western Cape, we indicate 2 right now. 39-year-old male who had traveled to Canada, a 15-year-old male who had traveled to France, and then in Limpopo, the Netherlands. This one is interesting because after we addressed our staff to say we are having no case from China, but they are all coming from Europe, the department then referred one of his staff members who had come from Europe to go to quarantine and was asymptomatic and then in the process got tested, and the test has come back positive, and he's a doctor. So he had visited parts of France and Netherlands, and had been put on self-quarantine because in discussion it became clear that he would need to consider that, and this has actually paid off. Then in Mpumalanga, about a 55-year-old man who had traveled to France, and again here it looks like we have here a medical professional who has also been found positive, but this is the case of imported case at the moment. Amongst those that we are investigating, we're trying to validate, because it appears that there may be already some with, who are internal transmission. So those cases of internal transmission will only be properly announced once we've got all the information, because for a start, it's not enough to just say was tested positive by a private laboratory. It has to be validated, but on top of that, we need to go into the history and try and locate the exact source of where that could have happened. In other words, we want to try and find who are they linked to. Can we find the contact that was the source of this infection? So it's important, therefore, that as soon as we get that information, we'll update you in a statement. Another comment about the South Africans who have come from Wuhan. We did see a lot of you had covered the story, and want to say thank you for that. As announced by the President, indeed, 114 South Africans were repatriated from Wuhan. Their flight landed on Saturday, and they settled well in the Ranch Hotel in Limpopo. As we had undertaken to ensure that we take all the precautionary measures in this repatriation process, yesterday all these citizens were examined and were tested for COVID-19. We await the results, but our medical team has assured us that they found them to be medically fit, and as they conducted the examination on them. 2 citizens had a very slight cough, which they didn't think was significant, but didn't show any other symptoms or any temperature. And so they just took a precaution to get them isolated so that they can monitor them as we await the results. But we are not quite worried about them, because we have not really had a strong history from China, and they are not showing significant symptoms, as it were. But we also wish to advise South Africans that when our citizens were boarding from Wuhan, we did medical screening at that level, and that screening was done both by South African and Chinese authorities. Of the citizens that had presented themselves for repatriation, 4 had remained behind. This is because they displayed some symptoms. It must be highlighted, this does not mean that they have been infected, but this was just done to mitigate the risk of having anyone in the plane that could have had any form of symptoms. So we are not saying that they've got the virus, but simply saying that on the criteria of bringing them back, we kept saying to the members here that we are only going to bring those South Africans who are displaying no symptoms and no fever, and have not tested positive in any way. So we want to therefore indicate that in that system, 4 had that problem, and the Department of Social Development has already been in touch with the families, and so that matter has been dealt with as it were. Now, the other issue that, of course, what we'd like to say is that the issue around Wuhan is really the least of our concern right now. We're not worrying about them, although there was quite a bit of excitement about it. We really never thought there was a big risk associated with them. It's also important to alert our citizens that individuals with other existing medical conditions, such as chronic lung disease and immune suppression, are more vulnerable and may experience severe symptoms if infected with COVID-19. We put up together teams that are giving us all the guiding information, and they've put to us a number of papers with clear advice in terms of how we deal with this, taking into account the conduct of the disease in other countries. And tomorrow, we're going to be convening a large gathering of clinicians, virologists, epidemiologists, pulmonologists, and the whole team that are involved in the management of infectious diseases to look at tightening and coordinating our response to this particular epidemic. Approximately 15% of those who develop the disease require hospitalization. Most cases, that is about 85%, can then self-quarantine at home and can be treated, or sometimes they don't require much treatment. In this regard, the clinicians observing the patient will make a determination and advise if they view the patient as high risk and therefore requiring hospital admission or can recover from home. We've already got some people who are asking the questions, oh, we hear so and so is positive, but why is it still at home? We just need to indicate that only 15% will require hospitalization, and probably 5% will end up with intensive care if that situation does not get any better. So we also want to reiterate, in terms of epidemiological evidence from affected countries, it shows that containment is possible at every early stage, and even then it's difficult, but we need to intervene at an early stage. It's difficult with that, but if you don't intervene at an early stage, then we don't have a much chance. That mitigation of risk is eventually the most pragmatic response and should start early. Delayed action will overwhelm the health system. In other words, if we wait until we run into several hundreds and thousands, you're running the risk of overwhelming the health services, because you'll notice that most of the people that we're talking about right now are not requiring admission. But one or two have been in, and we've had the report that they've got other complicated diseases, as it were. But what it means is that once the number goes huge, you end up with the 15% being a large number of people. Then 15% can overwhelm the services, especially because some of those on the 85% would need to still be seen on outpatient basis. So we want to make that point as a way of looking at it. It's difficult to give exact numbers about what should happen in South Africa, but we believe that with what we have seen so far, it is important for us to institute additional action. And whilst early action may be unpalatable, especially because sometimes we start the action when people don't really see the disease as being a big problem, it may actually, in other areas, affect negatively the economy or even social life and cause inconvenience. But it's actually the lightest you can do under the circumstances. So we'd like to appeal to our people to understand that even if they do not see the disease as severe, they need to know that we need to take extra steps to make sure that we prevent an escalation at that level. So we will therefore be talking a little bit about that, but just to say what it means is that we need everyone to work together. We need all of us as government to operate as a unit. We need to be united, government and civil society, business and labor, churches, traditional leaders, all of us need to be working together. We need to be working together as fellow South Africans, because this requires everyone to play their part and take responsibility to stop the spread of the infection. We do want to acknowledge some of the stakeholders who have come on board to give us assistance. For example, the NGOs who are calling to want to partner with government. We're going to be reaching out to them. We also have the private sector that has offered to assist us in a number of issues, particularly getting certain resources to assist with our mechanisms for tracking, for tracing, and monitoring facilities. It has actually been proven those countries that experience early spikes in the pandemic, these facilities have not been set up, and therefore it becomes important that we deal with those areas, as it were. In some instances, as we are looking at the response, it becomes also important for people not to view this as an issue only for government. So private sector has also come on board in some instances to offer us accommodation to support the quarantining programs that we've spoken about next to the airports. So a number of these mechanisms, a number of these expressions of support are welcome, and I want to thank the private sector for that, and I want to call on more and more private sector to come in. Some of them have also contributed in various ways, in communication and also in support on the quarantine in Limpopo and so on. So our call is for private sector to come on board. Each of the ministers will give us a sense of the actions that they will be taking on their side. But let me say that when the president declares the state of national disaster, and he therefore says that we have a national command council, this is a team of ministers and senior officials in government who will meet these 3 times a week, that will be released from some of their activities to focus on our response on the issue of the coronavirus. If one may put it in military terms, let's say all along, in the past few weeks and days, we went through what we call preparation, where we prepare for battle. Then we went through another aspect which we could call reconnaissance, where you then collect information about the size, the location, the behavior of the adversary forces. In this case, that's what we've done with the coronavirus. We have actually seen that in the past week, this is today, up to day 10, we've actually increased from 1 to 51. That was actually doubling every second day. Now that for us is not just exponential, we think it's an explosive rise in the cases that are positive. Mind you, are still dealing with imported cases, which then becomes our biggest problem, because each and every one of the individual is capable of creating their own mini outbreak. They can grow into massive numbers of people for you to deal with the contacts. The last we checked, in terms of the contacts, we'll probably be approaching 1,000 contacts. It's important for us to move ahead and try and suppress the curve. So the peak must not arise quickly. It needs to take a while to actually rise, and then to reduce the speed at which it is happening. So we therefore have to move to the next hierarchy here, and I said, using the military language, we therefore need to get onto the area of hard combat. Hard combat basically means we all now have to turn ourselves into soldiers, ready to fight. When we say so, we say that every South African is a soldier, because each and every one has to take responsibility to fight this infection. And it's not as simple, but it's going to be very hard. But just for it, so that you have a sense of the lie of the land as we move into the future. We are determined to suffer as few casualties as possible. We are determined to deal with this outbreak. We're also determined to take hard decisions, if need be. And therefore, the first phase where we are, we're going to be taking decisions where we're calling for restrictions. Restrictions is the mildest form of limiting contact from person to person. The president has taken advantage, has made use of Section 36 of the Constitution. That basically says that under certain circumstances, we have to look at what restrictions imposed to help to deal with the situation, which is a problem for what is the conduct, what are the numbers of people with the infection. And of course, where we think that the situation is getting completely out of control, we have learned from other countries, we've seen in China, we've seen in Italy, that At some point, even lockdowns become necessary. So we hope not to get to all of those steps. We're simply saying we just want South Africans to be aware that when we talk about hard combat, we're talking about a number of steps that are going to require commitment and South Africans working together and being united. We need everyone to support, we need everyone to play their role, but we also say we've seen that the coronavirus can be defeated. We've also seen that those who defeated coronavirus were united, they were determined, they worked together, they were prepared to take hard decisions. And therefore, that's the way we need to look at it. Having said so, I want to come back to say where we are. We've actually had the President has spoken about restrictions on travel. Your Minister will be able to give you more information about that. We've spoken about having to need to increase testing on those who are returning and increase quarantine on those who are returning. We're going to be setting up our system to do that. We've spoken about the need to reduce person-to-person spread by restricting numbers of people who are in meetings. Of course, we've got the ministers who actually have got all the information, whether this is music or sports or cultural or religious and so on. They will be the ones who are going to be engaging with those stakeholders at that level. We're going to be also looking at, I'm sure the minister will be able to give a little bit more of elaboration or restriction of visits to correctional services. We also are going to be asking that our hospitals restrict the numbers of people who are visiting the patients and also encourage them to use masks as they visit the patients in the hospitals. This is all to try and say we're dealing with this issue. At a certain point, I'm sure the ministers will be able to talk about the engagements with the transport sector. The ministers will also talk about the engagement with those in business, in the economic sector. You've got the Minister of DTI, the Minister of Small Business, the Minister of Treasury. All of them are here. They'll be able to share some of the ideas about what we're going to be doing as we move into the future. All we're calling for is that all of us need to work together, united as South Africans, to face a common adversary, which is a virus that is rampaging all over the world, but those countries and those nations that have been able to defeat it have been able to work together. We've seen a case in South Korea where 60% of the cases that are referable for testing actually emanate from an experience of one church that actually was convened in Daegu. And so we must say that the decisions that the President and the Cabinet have not taken them lightly. It's important for us to be upfront to say it's going to be difficult, but we'll make it. We need to work together as we go through all of that. We are intensifying our testing mechanisms. We have actually said that we want to increase capacity for testing. We have asked the laboratory services to work together, the public and private. I met them on Saturday. They need to operate as one system. Doesn't matter who owns which laboratory system. At the end of the day, everything gets coordinated by the National Health Laboratory Services. This is to make sure that we've got reliable data. This is to make sure that we've got validation and our quality of technical screening and testing is not in doubt. This becomes very important to us because it's the intelligence, it's data that tells us the conduct of the disease. We're meeting the physicians tomorrow. We also want them to operate as one team South Africa that's dealing with the issues of prevention, that's dealing with issues of testing and issues of management of those particular patients. It's again important that we will back them up. If a doctor believes that the patient must be treated at home, we leave the doctor to treat the patient at home. If the patient must be admitted, we leave the patient to be treated at that level. We're also talking to the private hospitals so that they must make available some of their facilities on demand to the government patients when necessary. We've also asked all the MSCs to go into every, remember before we asked that to designate the number of hospitals, we spoke about 10, 11, 18 hospitals. We said, no, it's no longer enough. We now need to designate district to district, there must be facilities there. In fact, they need to look at a little bit more of dedicated centers where we'll simply refer patients so that they don't mix with those who are not having coronavirus, so that the numbers, if they increase, they must increase separately from those who have got concomitant diseases that might cause them, that might cause them to be compromised. So we're looking at that. We're also now looking at the high risk of internal transmission. That risk had not reached us, but we believe now it will be setting in. That's the reason why we actually work very hard, because the problem of our inequality of our society means that there is one area where at the moment the people who have been found with the infection are those with the means, resources to visit Italy, Switzerland, Canada, US. But advantage of those is that you can get them back, you can quarantine them in their homes. Once this infection begins to spread in the taxis, in the trains, in the informal settlements, it's going to create a new dynamic. That will mean that we need to create a quarantine facility. So that's on the MECs, to start looking at possibilities of creating facilities for quarantine if necessary. And you will understand as well that when we say quarantine, it means someone might have to move from their homes. So when we talk about how we progress in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will be having we'll be looking at how all of these are panning out. And therefore, at a certain point, we will be able to make the necessary calls as to whether the current measures are enough to contain the infection. But what we are saying to all South Africans is that, led by the President and the Cabinet, we need to form a united force behind government and all the leadership in our country, because at the end of the day, this outbreak can only be defeated at the level of our communities. So issues of increasing possibilities for hand hygiene and general hygiene, ensuring that the coughing, the sneezing does not spread. Also encouraging people to spread, to make sure that they keep a distance against each other. It's going to be very, very important. I'm sure at a certain point, the Minister of Police will also talk to us about what they're going to be encouraging to be the situation, because it won't help us for people to drinking the whole night until the morning when we've got a situation like this. What kind of ideas we should be thinking about in pubs and some of the places, so that we must really make everybody understand that coronavirus is going to be attacking us at all levels unless we're prepared to fight and work together and strengthen the measures that the President has actually already given. We want to thank the President and the Cabinet for moving in this direction. A lot of our professionals have been calling for additional support, and we believe that this goes a long way to dealing with this particular challenge of containment, because containment is a lot more important than actually the treatment of one person who's already got the infection. The disease will burn itself out in about 2 weeks or so, but by that time, people must be strong enough to survive the infection. And therefore, we need to reduce the numbers of people who get the infection. We've also got calls of support from the Ambassador of the United States, who have also taken our request on getting the PEPFAR. PEPFAR has been assisting us in fighting HIV and tuberculosis, so that we can actually redirect some of the sources to increase the amount of testing. We have said testing must ultimately escalate to a point where we should be able to do several thousand of tests in one day. We will need to do that. We also need to be targeting areas where we do surveillance testing. We have spoken about the situation of students who might be exposed in the vessel of Witwatersrand, working with them to look at what do we do to contain the numbers of contacts, and also to advise them on quarantine. People don't have the same level of risk. There are those who are high priority risk, and then there are those who are lower and intermediate kind of risk. Our teams are going to be working on that. Our universities, our schools are going to be looked at, and so the ministers are here to talk about all of that. So for today, what we're going to request is that we're going to ask questions and all the ministers will give you information. But in the event that you didn't ask the question and the minister is aware that there's information you need to get, we'll ask the minister to give you to answer the questions that you have been asked. So thank you very much, colleague Minister Tebu. If we could take the questions and then all the ministers are here, we have the time to take you through and deal with all the issues so that you understand the details better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Before we go to the direction, can we request those that, in that all departments have got DGs, Director Generals here. All other staff, can we just go out? Anybody. Everybody who's not a Director General, can we all go out, please? And protocols, can you assist us with that line at the back? I don't see DGs there. I don't see DGs there. Except journalists, of course. Except those who are journalists, but those who are government staff, we are requesting you to just go up there. I know that a place has been arranged for you colleagues. Now, the Minister of Health has directed us to then take questions that will be answered by the ministers who are gathered here. We will take that route where we will then invite questions from all of you, which will be answered by our ministers and deputy ministers who are in attendance. Colleagues there, we start there. Of course, if I don't see you at the back, you'll have to stand up so that you are able to see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll take those hands for now. We'll come to you, colleagues. Thank you very much. Can we start? At the back? Yeah. There is something that you can press that will make us to hear you.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Mr. Genevieve Quince from the Business Day. I've got a few questions. Firstly, just a clarity from the Health Minister. When you said that you also talked to the private hospitals to make available facilities on demand, has there been commitment from the private hospitals on that? Also, how many ICU beds are there in the public sector, in the private sector and the military? And can you call on the private sector and the military when you need more hospital beds? On education, the plan for higher education institutions, schools were told to close, but not higher education institutions. Why not? And what's the plan there? And then on transport, for the Transport Minister, what are we doing about public transport? Many people in this country have to use taxis, trains. What happens there? What are the conditions in terms of that? And in terms of businesses, the President yesterday said no gatherings of more than 100 people. But there are some businesses who have open floor office plans with more than 100 people on the floor. When do you start telling businesses?
Restrict the number of questions as well.
Okay, so that's
so
my
that
last
everybody
one.
has a chance.
That's my last one. Thank
Yo.
you. Sorry, Mr.
Second one. At most, maybe let's just start there. Can we agree, colleagues, that at most 2 questions? Because all people want to ask. Now, if we are going to take 10 questions, what will the others ask? Thank you very much. The next.
Minister of Health, please. CCTV China here. This is a state of disaster. There has been mention of a state of emergency as a possibility for the future. This has been a plan that has been in process more than just yesterday. You've been thinking towards the China does set an example of the extreme end of imposing stringent controls. Is that the direction we're going? Do we see China's example in this? Because Italy and parts of Europe were quite slow in addressing this virus. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Actually, it's Slavet from a Port newspaper. Can you please give us some information about the financial aid package? And then also at this stage, what happens if people don't adhere to the guidance that given by government, and how will that change when we move towards a state of emergency?
Next.
Alex Winning from Reuters News Agency. Just to echo Antoinette's question specifically to Minister Mboweni, do we yet have a quantum for the planned amount of additional spending to come from the budget on the measures? And the second question is about the restrictions on the ports of entry. Are there also restrictions on goods entering South Africa? I.e., are we likely to see shortages for any retailers or anyone else who imports a lot of goods? Or is it just people that are being stopped from entering if they come from high risk areas? Thank you.
Next.
Ministers Maragha from AFP. Just to clarify, the President spoke about visas being annulled and stopped and stuff. Can you just clarify what happens to foreign nationals that are in the country at the moment on working visas, on travel or holiday visas? There's obviously a certain amount of anxiety amongst people that are here, whether they are going to be moved out, do they stay here, how do they renew and extend visas? Thank you.
Next.
Morning, Crisalda Lewis from SABC Television News. Just some details on basic education. What happens to the program, school program going forward? Is there anything in place currently to have a catch-up program of some sort? Higher education, if the Minister can please share some details on that. Graduations at the University of Johannesburg, at WITS, classes there are also affected. And do you have any commitment on the churches, for example? We're heading towards the Easter weekend. Is there any commitment from the churches, including the ZCC, for example, not to have the congregants go ahead with Mass?
Were you the last one?
Good morning. No, sir, I'm the last one. It's Govan. Okay. There's two more hands here.
Okay.
It's Govan here from ENCA. The Minister of Health, could you please confirm which part of the country you suspect the local transmission occurred at? Secondly, considering the rate of travel and diplomatic nature of the work, can you confirm if the cabinet has been tested for coronavirus? And then lastly, with the issue of taxis, sir, will the government be setting up any disinfectant sites at the taxi ranks around the country? And what is your plan for the passing around of money in taxis, which has been found to carry the contagion?
Next one. Whom I hope is the last one.
Hi, Minister. Actually, we're here from the Daily Guardian. Two questions. The Minister briefly spoke about combating hard combat that we have to go into. But I wanted to find out what are the exact skills, and are you guys speaking to community leaders, traditional leaders in high density areas? Because once we hit 100 cases, the growth is beyond just drastic. We've seen it in other countries. So I just want to ask a specific question in communicating to traditional leaders what has been done in that aspect. And secondly, about bed capacity, specifically ICU beds. Because even though we have specific hospitals and places, as you said, once people get critically ill, 15% of those people will need ICU beds. Do we have enough? How many specifically do we have? How many mechanical ventilations do we have? And how many ICU beds are actually free in private hospitals, in public hospitals, and all other hospitals? Thank you.
Colleagues, you can answer from where you are because the system is able to satisfy us answering from where we're seated instead of coming here. We will start with you, Minister of Health.
I thought you would allow the colleagues to go.
Okay. Anyone who wants to start? Higher education.
Oh, okay. Thanks, College Minister. On higher education, I just wish to highlight in the light of the questions that have been asked that firstly, what we've done, we have established a COVID-19 team, which comprises of the representatives of vice chancellors and college principals, as well as our higher health system and health experts that we've drawn together. I also want to say that I'm aware that the events on the ground are moving very fast, and various institutions are making contingency arrangements based on their own situation. But we've agreed on the following, that firstly, we will have to meet with the sector tomorrow morning to actually look at a comprehensive way forward on the situation. But let me highlight what we've agreed upon in the light of what the President has said and the other work that we've concluded. Firstly, we have said that contact with institutions must be limited. In terms of various institutions, only the University of Cape Town has actually closed the university by giving the Easter holiday break. What the other institutions like University of Johannesburg, Rhodes have done, have suspended contact lectures, and we are encouraging that all institutions should immediately suspend all contact lectures as well as minimize contact among students. But we are not as yet planning the shutdown, because there are pros and cons to actually shutting down the institutions completely. Where do you take the students? Moving them out of the residencies, and how do we deal with that? That's a matter that we'll discuss tomorrow as to whether the situation does warrant the shutting down. As of now, most institutions have said we've agreed they will limit contact, suspend lectures, use online more, and then manage the situation of students in the residences such that we minimize contacts and we are in better control of the situation. What I also need to say, Minister Mtem, very quickly, that the guidelines that we've agreed upon is that all major gatherings must be cancelled or postponed, like graduation ceremonies, major sports events, in line with the direction from the President. So is all international travel that must also be cancelled and be postponed, and use alternative means of carrying out those that are most important, like using technology. And all individuals who have traveled from outside the country, when they come back, they will be tested, and where there is necessity for quarantine, we've asked the institutions working with the Department of Health to do so. And also every institution we've agreed must develop a communication strategy. And all student health clinics are working very closely with the Department of Health to ensure that we are able to manage the virus better, working also with the National Institute of Communicable Diseases. Let me just end by just specifically highlighting the two institutions which have had people actually testing positive with the virus. Wits University, to begin, Wits has been in discussion with ourselves and the Department of Health on the protocols, and the students who have gotten in touch with those who have tested positively have actually been put under quarantine and to self-isolate at least for 2 weeks. And we are continuing to engage with Wits and the Department of Health on this scope. The University of Cape Town has also reported its first confirmed case of the virus. And in this instance, it's a lecturer who had tested positive, and the institution has made a decision that in the interest of its staff and students, and in the light of the President's statement last night, is bringing this vacation forward by a week, and the students have been asked to leave the residences within 72 hours from yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we are speaking education, let's continue with basic education.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Chair, in terms of the basic education, we had a teleconference with all provinces this morning to look at the implications of the President's announcement. So all provinces were represented in the teleconference, and we estimated that we will be losing 10 days, because it's 2 days this week, and it's a week after the vacations, and we've agreed that I will give a notice where we formally give a notice of the change of the school calendar, which will mean that in June we reduce our June holidays, and then again take another 3 days in September, so it makes up for the 10. So that's how we felt we should deal with the 10. But in the meantime, we felt that it gives us a very good break, long time to do things that sometimes we are unable to do, like intensifying some of our programs which don't require physical context, like the Read to Lead campaign. So the heads of departments are going to be changing notes today, and by Wednesday we'll be able to say what needs to happen. We've also sent notice to schools that they should, as I say, taking advantage of the long break than anticipated, that schools must give children or worksheets to work with families to give them their books, because normally schools keep the workbooks at schools. So those are the arrangements which are done school by school to make sure that children go lots of work at home and appeal to communities and homes to assist them. But basically, formally, the way we hope to make up for the lost days is to extend the school days. If we go beyond 10 days, we might extend the year into a week longer, just to make sure that we cover the curriculum. So that's what we are doing as MPCs this morning. But as I say, heads of department are going to also interact amongst themselves and we'll be able to give further details if need be. But that's what we agreed on this morning. Then we'll be announcing that schools are formally closing tomorrow and they reopen on the 14th, unless there's any other notification or information.
Minister Mteto.
Thank you, Chairperson. You realize that the sector, sports, arts and culture is going to be the hard hit with the measures we are taking, because it thrives on the majority of people attending. So the limitation would have a very big impact, negative one, on the livelihood of the sector itself. Therefore, going forward, the engagement with the private sector, the President and Minister McKinsey has outlined, becomes very important here. Already, the sector has started voluntarily on their own to take some measures. Some of them, some have gone to an extent of ensuring the awareness on the COVID-19 amongst players. If you take PSL, for instance, they've been doing that. We are going to be meeting both the sporting bodies and arts and culture sector tomorrow to devise means of responding to what we are faced with and beyond, as I said, as it relates to the livelihood of the artists, of athletes, and so on and so forth. So that's where we are. In terms of the regulation, in addition to the National Disaster and Health Regulations, the Safety and Sports and Recreation Events Act is going to be helpful also to ensure that everything is done within the regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Mabon.
Thank you very much, Minister Mteto, and thank you for this statement of the media. There was a question about possibility of using military hospitals and private clinics. I can attest to the fact that we issued a directive that all military hospitals should have isolation areas. So we will be able to cater for all people, but also if there is a need, the Department of Health may direct some of the people to some of the hospitals where are there. Second matter, we are looking at cancelling some of the major events which were planned by the defense industry in China. Consultation is underway with the defense industry itself. I'm sure you recall that every second year we have what is called the Africa Defense Space Exhibition, which is held in September at the Waterproof Base in Victoria. It's a huge gathering of people, usually brings more than 100 defense industry companies from all over the world. And we are now in the process of consultation about that, because we have to shut down, because there's no guarantee that by September this epidemic shall occur, this wave shall pass. We also, like the directive which was issued yesterday by Cabinet, will cancel all travels from within the defense sector, not as an industry, as members of the defense force. We've given a directive that all our bases, because we recall that we have big numbers, our bases sometimes over 1,000, if you look at area like Bolton, for instance, where we train our army, that's a huge base, and we give an instruction that there should be scans in all the bases, at the entrance of all the bases of the defense force, but also we should supply sanitizers. Of course, we are also encouraging self-quarantine, that once people feel unwell, they should subject themselves. People should take responsibility. It's not going to be easy to go around looking for people who are not well. It is a person, the onus is on the individual to come forward and make himself or herself available for a test. Thank you. I think those are the
Minister Pan, if there's any question for him. None.
I don't think there was, except that I'm not aware of Canada being tested. At this time, most international conferences have been cancelled or postponed, and thus there has been a fairly insignificant travel, even from a department such as ours, which has a lot of international commitments. There's a significant reduction with respect to international meetings. The visa issue, I think the lady will speak to it, but I don't think there's a focus on persons who are already in South Africa, except with respect to the past 20 days, but we'll rely on you to respond on that. Thank you.
The Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, colleague. Well, I suppose the fundamental question that you're asking about is that at the end of the day, most of the activities have to be paid for. So where's the money coming from? I suppose that's what you're asking. But before I answer that, let me just elaborate a bit about the structural arrangements being made. As you had the Minister of Health saying that he was using a military language. So the first place, the National Treasury has to be organized itself. To that extent, they already have a National Treasury coordinating working group inside the National Treasury, which is chaired by one of the deputies director general. They meet as regularly as they deem fit. Firstly. Secondly, a structural arrangement between the National Treasury and the Department of Health, National Department of Health. Again, they communicate regularly and meet as when they need to. Thirdly, the Minister of Finance and the MECs of finance will coordinate whatever needs to be coordinated financially. And the MECs of finance will coordinate with the MECs of health in the provinces, who in turn are obviously coordinating with the Minister of Health. So this is structural arrangement in place to make sure that we are coordinated, we are organized, and we are not haphazard. And we are not opportunists. So now the financing. We stand ready to do two things. One, there are funds available within the National Disaster Fund, which will be immediately available. I don't want to mention amounts in case prices begin to change. But funds have been set aside. It's the first thing. Secondly, as the situation develops, we will need to set aside further funding. That means we'll have to reduce programs throughout the government system by reducing the allocated amounts so that we can shift these funds towards these projects, which were all committed to achieve. Finally, two things. The National Treasury officials are also in contact with the financial sector regulatory authorities, which report to the Minister of Finance, in order to make sure that we have a coordinated approach as well as far as the banking and financial services sector is concerned. I think that's all that I can say for now. But let me indicate the key issue that the Minister of Health will come back to about this, is to make sure that we should not have a situation where we say we are unable to procure testing facilities or whatever is necessary. That's the urgent issue. So I'm happy that Minister Mthethwa is willing to suspend some of his activities so I can take some money from that and give it to the Minister of Health. Thank you very much.
Minister,
thank you very much. From our side, the first priority now, which we started last night, was to do the regulations that will guide this national disaster. And I can say that those will be ready today. And the second thing is we will then have to communicate with our stakeholders, which are quite broad. That will include the provincial governments, including the quarters in the province, the municipalities, SALGA, traditional leaders, and the rest of civil society. The provincial governments, we are planning to have a teleconference as soon as the regulations are ready, so that they are on board and they can communicate with the municipalities. We will meet the stakeholders at various levels, but we also have to deal with them. We are in contact with the IEC because the announcements have huge implications for the IEC, especially with the by-elections that which were supposed to take place this week. Some are supposed to take place next month. and it means the way we deal with elections has to totally change. So we are now in touch with them, and they may have to be in touch with the courts to allow the courts to extend the time, the 90 days, so that we can look at how we reorganize how we conduct elections. Because elections, as you know, involves a lot of physical contact. You touch ballot papers, you give them to the voter touches the ballot paper, you take the ballot paper and give it back to the official. Then at some stage all the ballot papers are touched, being counted. So we need to just look at how we reorganize them. So we may have to postpone some of the elections so that we reorganize. And of course also at the polling stations, normally political parties bring their people besides the voters. So there is usually far more than 100 people at every polling station. So all those things now will have to be looked at differently. And of course, in the communities, it means the functions in the communities, the municipalities must help us, and the ward councillors and so on, to make sure that the gatherings are not huge gatherings and they take place. Also, we need to look at how we tweak the way of doing the IDPs, because some of the meetings are big, so we may have to fragment them. So there are lots of things, implications for our sector. And of course, we also, as a department, will cancel the travel, international travel, and even minimize the national travel. We also have to make sure that the sanitizers and all the things not only are available in our offices, but we must talk to municipalities to assist communities, because as a country and as a nation, we are very social in our behavior, and this social distance is very alien. So we need to really work hard to get those people, when they go to a funeral, when they come back, they wash their hands in the same place. Then we may have to add an additional basin after they've washed the sanitizers or the soap and water. So there are lots of detailed things that we have to look at in terms of how we deal with our social, because social distance is really alien. So without going into details, but we have to meticulously look at all the things that need to be changed when we need to talk our people about. And of course, as the Minister of Health also said, people in the wards, in the municipalities, in the districts, a lot of them will not be able to follow the trend that we are at now of finding out that you were in contact with the person, self-quarantining, or even if you are infected, self-quarantining, because they just don't have that luxury. They will not have a room to themselves with their own toilet and all that. So we have to then, working as a team of government, identify areas in municipalities where people can be quarantined should the need arise. So there are all those things, there are many others, but I'll stop at that for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pasha.
Thank you very much, colleague. The President noted yesterday in his statement that the virus will have a significant impact on the economy. We've identified 6 areas of work over the last few weeks that will seek to support efforts both to contain the spread of the virus, but also to ensure that we have the economic means to fight this. These areas, the first one is we've been monitoring the impact of the virus on the global economy and on critical export channels that South Africa is dependent on. Secondly, we've worked to secure supplies of basic public hygiene and medical stocks. Third, we've worked on industrial measures to protect against infection. Fourth, we're looking at the organization of industry to address potential downtime, short time, and shutdowns. Fifth, we're in discussion now on the measures to deal with the anticipated economic slowdown. And finally, we're looking at securing supply chains and dealing with disruptions there. At 2 o'clock today, we will be meeting with the leadership of the business community, trade unions, and various community organizations at a specially convened executive council meeting of NEDLAC, where we will seek, together with colleagues from different sections, to develop common approaches, common communication, and coordinated responses between business, labor, community, and government. We've also been reaching out to a number of sectors. We've been in discussion with food and beverage sectors, steel, autos, the retail sector, particularly food retail, pharmaceutical companies, mining companies, and importers of basic products like wheat. On the securing of the supplies of public health hygiene stocks, we've looked at provisions of hand sanitizers, face masks, gloves, protective clothing, and test kits, analyzing and quantifying existing production capability in South Africa, and looking at what we need to do to scale up, what some of the constraints are, some of these components are imported and we want to secure those. In respect of industry measures to protect against infection, there was the Business Day question earlier about workplaces with more than 100 people, and Minister Nesi will provide more information later after the NEDLAC meeting. But essentially what we're looking at is getting industries, every sector, to work on plans to limit the spread and avoid the spread of the virus at the workplace. So social distance provisions around canteens, clocking in arrangements, all of those will be rapidly worked through after the NEDLAC meeting. We're looking at industrial hygiene and mass cleaning of surfaces, and also, and this is a useful opportunity, seeing how workplace medical facilities could be used both for staff, but also in some instances, in appropriate examples, for surrounding communities. Some mining companies have already indicated a willingness to look at that, and that may expand the capability of the public health system. On industry organization, it's discussions will commence this afternoon on issues like short time, job sharing, the question of the UIF and WCA resources, all of that. Again, Minister Nesi has been looking at the numbers, trying to identify what is possible, what's not, and further discussions will take place. On economic slowdown measures, Minister Mboweni has already indicated that Treasury is on high alert, that they've put together a National Treasury Coordinating Working Group to be able to see when and how interventions can best be made. We're also looking at the work that can be done by development finance institutions to support companies, particularly in their portfolios that are currently struggling. And we will be engaging with the commercial banks and financial sector. On securing the supply chain, there was a question from Reuters earlier on the ports, and we have noted from the announcement by the President that it's principally land borders, and even there it could be the smaller land borders. On the sea ports of entry, only 2 have been affected, and only in respect of passenger and crew. So our intention is to get the goods movement in the economy flowing. Flowing is important both for our for getting essential supplies, but also because this is a critical source, obviously, of economic activity that we need. There are also critical industries that we've been talking to, from healthcare, food and beverage and so on, to make sure that they have their supply lines intact, not only the import supply lines, but also the domestic ones. And from the retail sector, they're optimistic that they can work on retaining their supply lines. Of course, we need to ensure that there's no panic buying, because that then leads to further panic in the retail sector. But what has been strong and important for us is that we have a domestic industrial capability to supply the basic goods, basic food goods, basic consumer goods, and so we're setting up and making sure that those don't get disrupted. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Minister
Thank you, Minister. I'm told that the questions that have been posed, and I think we'll try to answer as part of our brief. Aviation is one of the high-risk sector which enables high levels of mobility and by extension the spread of coronavirus. As this sector, we have put in place measures to mitigate the risk. Desktop exercise has been carried out across all our airports in accordance with the World Health Organization advisory to ensure that screening measures to limit the risk of exportation or importation of the disease are implemented without unnecessary restrictions to international traffic. Our agency at the airports, AXA, as you all know, has since procured, you will have seen at all the airports, and distributed masks for all frontline staff at all AXA airports. As an integral part in the airport operation value chain, the following are mandatory measures for the airlines and all handling agents. All airline or ground handling staff carrying out assisted passenger services, especially passengers with reduced mobility, are required to use personal protective equipment, which is referred to as surgical mask and gloves, when facilitating arriving international passengers. Passenger-facing personnel, particularly for all international arrivals, transfers, terminal and the domestic recheck, are required to use surgical masks and gloves. All handling agent staff that are at high risk or contact, including but not limited to passenger escorting, VIP services, facilitation, ticket safe baggage, handling and loading, aircraft grooming, catering services, cargo handling agents, bus drivers and crew transport drivers are also required to wear surgical masks. All passenger buses will require additional cleaning, sanitization measures to be implemented, and the AXA will increase oversight in this aspect. Yesterday, the President announced that we are imposing a travel ban on foreign internationals from high-risk countries such as Italy, Iran, Korea, Spain, Germany, the United States, the United Kingdom, and China as from the 18th of March, 2020. From a transport point of view, this means no foreign nationals will be allowed from these countries through our ports of entry, which include airports, seaports, and railways. Charter operators will be rerouted to international airports that have the port's health capability to manage suspected cases. The following international airports have the necessary capacity and will be ready to handle charter flights. OR Tambo, Lanzere, Kinshasa, Upington, Polokwane, Bramfisher, Kruger, Mpumalanga International, Johannesburg, Port Elizabeth, and Cape Town. The Civil Aviation Authority has issued guidelines for infection control for all airlines in respect to passenger cargo and baggage handling. This is guided by the general guidelines of WHO. In order to mitigate the risk, the Civil Aviation Authority will conduct ramp inspections on all identified high-risk airlines. The question about public transport, we will engage with everybody and issue instructions. Among others, in our states, we've got PRASA, which will undergo and perform sanitization in all our trains. Of course, the social distancing will affect us en masse in terms of trains and taxis. So that includes education in relation to this, but over and above, random testing will be applied in all the taxi ranks and also in the trains, but equally, taxis will also be expected to undergo sanitization across the country. We will engage with all, starting from today, and consolidate our plans that are already in place for implementation after the instruction by the President yesterday. Maritime, SAMSA will immediately operationalize an operational plan for all ships calling at port, and guided by also the International Maritime Organization and the World Health Organization. And you asked the question about will it be people and the cargo. The cargo will not, but people will be not be allowed to disembark. Cross-border transport, we are working with all other agencies in relation to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Mjini. There was no question relating to the intelligence sector. I would also like just to speak on a few issues that we have put in place as a department to assist all departments of government in general in trying to spend the time on the rise of this virus. We met this morning to look at a few things, including the capacitation of our border intelligence unit, which we work very closely, and all the staff work very closely with the Department of Home Affairs. I think there are going to be more people that will be able to analyze and disseminate information timelessly to both the Border Management Agency and also the airports and other airports. We have, the President announced yesterday the establishment of the National Command Council, which of course will be the command center, and we have put in place a process of ensuring that our National Communication Center started the process of identifying the systems that we put in place in the form of secure communications to assist the National Command Council. We are members of the Non-Proliferation Council, which is administered by the DTI. This morning, we also worked on the capacitation and activation of this unit, and they will provide information, good information will provide to NIPOC, which will then be disseminated to other departments. This unit is capacitated by people who are qualified in biochemistry, who know the work of biochemical pathogens, microbiologists, and they will be the ones that will be going to be working hand in glove with the Department of the DTI and also with the Department of Health to provide what we do, which is counter proliferation. That would be the analysis, the collection of, from a counterintelligence perspective, and analysis of information that we receive from time to time. We will also look at the tools, the variety of tools that we will utilize to get the most accurate picture of the spread and impact of the virus, working together with the Department of Health by putting in place your signals intelligence, your human intelligence, and your scenario mapping scenarios, so that you can be able to look at information as it comes in, analyze it, be able to sketch scenarios, and be able to come up with a product that helps the department and also government to take decisions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. There were no direct questions to us, but I think as a sector we need to indicate that we have taken heed in terms of the postponement of the major events in light of the 100 people getting. I did indicate that we met with the sector last week. This morning we also touched base, and the message that the sector is sending from through the Minister is that they do understand, and I know a lot of people have been trying to understand what is our reaction, is that we do understand as the sector the measures that have been put in place and in support of the measures, and to show that they have committed to providing some of their facilities through to Minister of Health so that they can be checked for the suitability in case they are needed either for quarantine or for any other measures. So the sector is coming on board. Another issue that I need to highlight, Minister Mthengo, is that we as a sector or as a department, we host Tourism India, which is an event that has major participants globally with more than 8,000 participants. We are now officially postponing the event, which was going to sit in May. We will announce the date after we've been able to finalize our post-corona strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There were two questions directed to Home Affairs. The first is about the land port of entry, and the second is about visas. Now, I received a message this morning from my colleague who is here on the main table, Minister Patel, wishing to know the port of entry because ministers of trade and industry are nervous. They wanted to know which one. I want to mention right from the beginning. What we are doing at the port of entry has got nothing to do with commerce whatsoever, with trade and industry. That's not going to be affected in any way whatsoever. We have got 72 ports of entry in the country. 53 are land ports of entry. 11 are airports, which Minister Mbaluya has mentioned here. 8 are seaports. Now, the 11 airports, there's going to be no change whatsoever. Just heightened vigilance in terms of checking the people who are coming in and out. But we are not tampering with them. The 8 seaports, we are tampering with only 2. The other 6 will operate as they were. We'll tamper only with Saldanha Bay and Mossel Bay, only in as far as passengers and crew changes are involved, are concerned, meaning there will be commercial activity in Saldanha Bay and Mossel Bay, like all the other 6 which are remaining. The only difference is that we no longer allow passengers to disembark at Saldanha Bay and Mossel Bay, and we won't allow crew changes. Crew changes is if a crew that has been at sea, they are now tired, they disembark and get inland, and then a fresh crew gets on board and move on. That is going to stop. That's the only thing that will happen on the seaports. Now, the land ports of entry, which I said are 53, we're closing 35 of them. Now, all these 35 have never had any commercial activity whatsoever, anyway. And it was only a movement of people, pedestrians, and cars. And because our aim is to stop the virus from moving through our borders, so we can only stop people, not goods. The second thing, the second criteria which we used to select these 35 ports is that they had never had any presence of Department of Health or health authorities, meaning that they don't have any capacity to check anybody for health, for temperature scanning and all that. In fact, the 35 ports out of the 7 entities that we usually find at the ports of India, they only had 2. They only had police, SAPS, and Home Affairs. They never had any other. There was no customs, and no agriculture, no environment. So these are the ones that we are going to close. Now, there will be 12 border posts of entry which will be closed between us and Botswana. It means 5 will remain operating because there were 17. We'll close 9 border posts with Lesotho. It means 5 will remain operating because we had 14. We'll close 3 border posts with Mozambique. It means only 1 will remain operating because we had 4. We will close 5 border posts with Namibia. It means only 2 will remain operating because we had 7. We had only 1 border post with Zimbabwe. That's by Great Bridge, and we'll never close that one, of course. There is a total of 1,400 Home Affairs officials in all the 72 ports of entry. And these 35 account for only 90, and they will be redistributed throughout the other ports of entry. So maybe I need to mention specifically about Bay Bridge before you ask me questions, because I suspect they are coming. It's the only border post we had with Zimbabwe, and we can't close it because it's a gateway to the rest of our continent. There are 124 officials there. We'll send 20 extra officials from this 90 from the closed border post. And then the remaining 70 will be distributed to the remaining 17 border posts, but with special focus on Lebombo, the only one that will be remaining with us, but also with Oshu. One of the remaining 5 with Eswatini is the main one, and also with Maseru and Fitzpatrick, part of the remaining 5 with Lesotho, both Maseru and Fitzpatrick, and then Oxford, part of the remaining with Botswana, but this is the main one. So that's what will happen with the ports of entry. The important take-home message is that all of them were not commercial ports of entry. We only stopping people and cars as all. So the issue of visas is going to work this way. In fact, the only way to stop people from, the only legal way to stop people from the countries that were mentioned by the President is through the visa regime. Now, this is how it's going to work. The countries that the President has mentioned, which we are focusing on, are 8. Out of these 8, 6 of them used to come to South Africa visa-free. They never needed any visa. It is Italy, France, Germany, USA, South Korea, and the UK. They needed no visas to come to South Africa. So this move will mainly affect Iran and China. They needed visas all the time to come to South Africa. So there are 2 things that are going to happen with visas. As the President has said, we're going to revoke the visas already issued. Between January and February, we've issued 8,339 visas to China. This will be revoked. And in the same period, January and February, we've issued 429 visas to Iran, and this will be revoked. Now, the remaining 6 countries which used to come visa-free, we will now start requesting visas from them. And it's through these visas that we will control their movement in and out of the country. That means we'll start asking for visas from Italy, from France, from Germany, US, from South Korea, and from the UK. Now, from the medium risk countries, which are three, as the President has mentioned, Portugal, Hong Kong, and Singapore, we will also ask for visas. But the main difference with the others is that it will be sort of not a very tight requirement. The only thing we'll ask during their application for visa is to ask for a health indicator. That's why we need the visa, just to make sure that because they come from medium risk countries, they've been tested, we understand these countries are testing, and they've been given the certificate that they are clear of the virus. Basically, that's what will happen. And the question, I think, which Minister Naledi Pandya has already answered, for people who are here inside the country, who are on study visas, who are on work visas, etc., are not going to be affected in any way. They will be handled in the same way that the Department of Health handles all the other South Africans, because they are living with us, they are socializing with us, they are doing everything. They are part and parcel of the population of South Africa at the moment. Nothing will happen to them. Things will only change if they start going home. And home is one of these countries that I mentioned. Then a new things will start creeping in. Lastly, from Home Affairs, in order to make sure that we follow the trail of all the people from the high impact countries that will be coming to South Africa, we have what is called advanced passenger process, which I think is important for me to explain. It's an offshore immigration control. It allows us to decide who must come into South Africa or not. This has been working, maybe without the knowledge of many people, it has been working for 24 hours. Any plane that leaves any airport in any part of the world, before they leave, they give us a list of passengers who are on the plane, and before it leaves, to see if we accept that they must all come to our country. If anybody has been flagged by Interpol, etc., we say no. I'm sure many of you who have been in a plane will remember that just before they close the doors, there is a gentleman or a lady who will give a list to the pilot there. That list has got all the names of the passengers. It's sent to us electronically before the planes leave. If there's somebody we don't like there, we'll tell them that no, so and so mustn't come. And they'll offload that person. Yes, that advanced passenger process has been there in Home Affairs, right? So I think it has been prepared for the World Cup. So we have got it. So what we have done is that from Saturday, we have selected a team of 6 people. They work in terms of 12 hours. Once the plane leaves, the advanced passenger process will have allowed the plane to leave and come here. But it will have given us the list of passengers. These 6 people, 3 each, will then have the whole night, because most of the planes we are talking about will be from Europe, to check each and every passenger, to check their profile, because some of them might come from a different country, and might come from the country that is focused on, but go through a different country. So this team will check. By the time the plane arrives here, we'll be knowing the profiles of each one of them, we'll be knowing which passenger we must go and check very carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Lamuna.
Thank you very much, Minister Tembu, and all the colleagues present here. I will speak on 2 issues. Firstly, on justice, because we are also responsible for constitutional development. I will also speak with regard to correctional services. The first one with regard to the Constitution is that the President's announcement affects the rights of South Africans, and it is done in terms of the Constitution. And this announcement, in terms of the Constitution, in terms of Section 36 of the Constitution, which is the limitation clause, it does provide for the limitation of rights. And it says that in terms of the limitation clause, rights listed in the Bill of Rights may be limited by law of general application, where the limitation will be reasonable and justified in an open and democratic society based on dignity, equality, and freedom, and taking into account all relevant factors, including the nature of the right, the importance of the purpose of the limitation, the nature and extent of the limitation, the relation between the limitation and its purpose, and less restrictive means to achieve the purpose. I'm reading this in the Constitution for the purpose of the public, so that even the members of the media could be able to help the public understand some of these constitutional provisions which the President relied upon, including the Cabinet, to limit the rights which we are limiting in terms of the various laws. Minister Mteko spoke about the sports laws, and Minister Mkize spoke about the health regulations and the health laws, and Minister Mkosa spoke about the Disaster Management Act. So all those laws are going to be used to limit some of the rights during this containment of the virus. And they will be anchored with the two laws in terms of the health regulations and the Disaster Management Act. I just want to read the Disaster Management Act provisions, which I think might also be beneficial to the public. The Disaster Management Act states that the invocation of the national disaster provides the executive with far-reaching powers to manage the national crisis in the country, including the power to make regulations or issue directions or authorize the issue of directions concerning the release of any available resources of the national government, including stores, equipment, vehicles, and facilities, the release of personnel of a national organ of state for the rendering of emergency services, the implementation of all or any of the provisions of the National Disaster Management Plan that are applicable in the circumstances, the evacuation to temporary shelters of all or part of the population from the disaster-stricken or threatened area if such action is necessary for the preservation of life, the regulation of traffic to, from, or within the disaster-stricken area or threatened area, the regulation of the movement of persons and goods to and from or within the disaster-stricken or threatened area, the control and occupancy of premises in the disaster-stricken or threatened area, the provision, control, or use of temporary or emergency accommodation, the suspension or limiting of the sale, dispensing, or transportation of alcohol beverages in the disaster-stricken or threatened area, the maintenance or installation of temporary lines of communication to, from, or within the disaster area, the dissemination of information required for dealing with the disaster, emergency procurement procedures, the facilitation of a response post-disaster recovery and rehabilitation, other steps that may be necessary to prevent an escalation of the disaster, or to alleviate, contain, and minimize the effects of the disaster, or steps to facilitate international assistance. I'm reading this so that the public will also understand the measures and the available statutory that is at the disposal of the executive. And as we speak, as Minister Namini said, we are currently developing the regulations that are going to be promulgated as urgently as possible, that are going to govern all the issues that are stated in the Disaster Management Act, that are going to further limit some of the rights that the people are currently enjoying, as necessary, as per the advice of the Department of Health. So the decision of Cabinet, one of the questions was that are we using best practice from China or anywhere in the world to learn in terms of putting the strongest measures possible? Yes, we are going to use and put the strongest measures possible available in terms of the regulations. What the law permits us to do, we are going to do it, and what will enable us to be done to prevent the disaster is all the options are on the table. And we will be guided by the Department of Health whatever measure or instrument that will be needed by the Department of Health to contain the virus, we are going to look into the laws, and when the law allows it to be done, we are going to do it. And if there is no regulation which allows it to be done, we will promulgate it without delay. And we have also been, we want to also thank the members of the legal fraternity across the country. Some of them have already volunteered their services. They are saying they will help us, and some are already helping us with various work that relates to various work streams in relation to this. And they are doing so voluntarily. So this situation calls for all of us South Africans, and we want to also thank them. One of the issues that Minister Mkhize spoke about is an issue that might lead to the escalation of the, in case there's a need to escalate. As we have said, all options are on the table. But at this stage, we really believe the options that the Department of Health want can be done through the various regulations in terms of the Disaster Management Act, and they may at this stage, at this phase, be sufficient. But if there is a need, and I must state that the declaration of the national state of disaster, to the best of our collection, has never been done before for the whole country, for the whole nation. So this has been the most measure that has been applied by this cabinet at this stage, and we believe it is necessary, and it is also the strictest means by which we can limit the rights at this stage. If, as Minister Mkhize said, it does not, there may be some other strengthening we may need to do, we will invoke the powers under the State of Emergency Act of 1997, as read with Section 37 of the Constitution, which states that the declaration of state of emergency to be made by the President by proclamation in the Government Gazette. A state of emergency may be declared in the Republic or in any area within the Republic in terms of Section 218 of the State of Emergency Act. I'm giving you that this is it will be an element of last resort if there is a need. And we are also showing or indicating to you that we are putting all options on the table, and we will use all the necessary means as guided by the Constitution. And again, the department is currently drafting the regulations to be ready in case there is a need for the declaration of a state of emergency. And the next one relates to correctional services. You will pardon me, I'm just trying to get the... They say I must talk from my heart. I don't want to do what we used to do in the UK. Because upon arrival in government, they told me that here, you must read from the script. You don't just talk. So let me just, I got this thing now in the last. With the correctional services, in terms of the announcement by the President, is that we are going to operationalize to sanitize all correctional centers. And this closely monitored and managed by Covid-19 special task team, in liaison with the Department of Health. All the facilities will be sanitized across the country. And as we're speaking, the process has started to ready the facilities that after 30 days, they can be able to now begin a process of allowing visitors, of allowing other people from outside to come in. We have got, as we speak now, as from the 13th of March 2020, the inmate prison population of South Africa is 154,223. So it's a huge population which we cannot take any risk on. And thanks to the President's foresight, when he did the remission in December, we had an overcrowding of almost 37%. But as we speak today, the overcrowding in our cells is 23%, and the department is ready, will be able to contain and manage anything inside the cells in terms of testing, in terms of isolation, in terms of any measure that is needed. One of the issues which we'll have to engage with the members of the judiciary is that these stringent measures may affect the court, because some of the inmates may need to go to courts may need to consult with their lawyers, who are not currently may not be able to access them. So we are in engagement with the judiciary. We will further have a meeting with the leadership of the judiciary and also of the legal fraternity to see how do we mitigate these factors so that the courts are still able to operate, the inmates are still able to go to court and come back, and we are able to isolate them and all that. So there will still be further measures that we need to take, so that when they go to the courts and when they come back, there is a kind of procedure that we'll have to undergo. And this we are doing in consultation with the Department of Health, so that they advise us what are the measures. The other measures that we are looking at is about the new or incoming inmates who are coming in who are newly sentenced. How do we isolate them and ensure that they don't come closer to the ones and after the issues of testing and when we are clear, how do we integrate? The other part relates to remand detainees who from time to time may need to go to trial and all that. So there is various categories of the inmates that we are currently in consultation with the Department of Health, the judiciary, and everyone. How do we manage that? And including with the courts, there is still further discussion, but at this stage, we expect that the courts will also have to comply with the issue of 100 people in the facilities, because that is now what is expected. You know, sometimes our courts, there are lots of people who want to go and observe the proceedings and so forth. So we will further develop measures with the judiciary and the legal fraternity and all the stakeholders that will also help us to ensure that only those are necessary to be in the courts are in the courts. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister Kim. Minister Patel has already indicated that this afternoon we're meeting with the network stakeholders to look at the impact on the labor market and the measures which have to be taken. And but what we'll be doing there will be, amongst others, reminding both the employers and employees to fully comply with the measures which have been outlined by the President, and also adhere to the guidelines issued by the Department of Health with regards to the promotion of high levels of hygiene and in the workplaces. And Minister Mkhize reiterated that all sectors have responsibilities. So we want to remind the employers that they have a legal duty of care towards their employees. Both the Occupational Health and Safety Act and the Hazardous Biological Agent Regulation place a responsibility on the employers to take extreme measures to protect health and safety of the employees. So the employers, therefore, are required to undertake a number of measures. But we can't talk about those measures until we've had discussions with the various stakeholders and also listen to their proposals. But we will impress upon that employers are required to provide employees in terms of health and risk assessment with the necessary protective equipment they are required to put in place, or even systems to deal with the outbreak, as well as include all mitigating measures that have to be put in place and until the outbreak has been dealt with. We will also be discussing with them in instances where employees are required to be quarantined as a result of having traveled into the different countries or coming into contact with the virus, with various types of leaves we are going to be talking about them, which will be utilized in this instance, and talk about any other extraordinary measures which we will have to do if it's necessary. Again, in line with the provisions of the compensation for occupational injuries and diseases. If employees contracted the COVID-19 during the course of performing their duties, they will have to be compensated. We will be talking about all those issues. And as Minister Patel has said, the impact of the pandemic on our economy cannot be undermined. But we will be dealing with this matter seriously, case by case, when we are talking to the companies, and we are going to be appealing for the cooperation with everybody, and together with the trade union. Thank you.
Well, much, except that the management with us, one is members at the front desk will take measures to make sure that those that are in the community centers, because they will continue to be in contact with the community out there. Even if there are hundreds, by the time the day ends, there might have been thousands, but coming in those places. So we need to really take care of them. The second one, we're still looking after crime. Definitely, we're not going to deviate from that one. Knowing very well that we don't have to have a very close social contact, but if we arrest you, unfortunately, we can't arrest you through the email. We have to be there. So it might still happen in the execution of our duties. It doesn't mean that because we don't have to come close to you, we won't come close to you. That's that. So we continue with that. There are other measures that have been taken. We have spoken with the municipality of stopping the breathalyzer. Stopping the breathalyzer doesn't mean we stop checking you that you're drunk. That will continue. We'll go straight to your blood test. The nurses and doctors on the field will throat blocks and make sure that that continues. It happens. The fourth one, the Minister of Justice raised the issue of limiting the rights on this one. You might not have the luxury of asking us the search warrant because the matters are urgent. We are working on the disaster environment, so we might limit that when we need to act effectively. The last point on those limitations is that even if you do have a trading license of alcohol, this Disaster Act tells us that we might stop it, the movement. So we'll work hard on stopping the movement of alcohol. These places, usually they become very much carefree in the social distance, social working together. People, they come together, they dance together, they do everything together. We might have to really work hard on it, whether we are licensed or unlicensed. Actually, what we encourage when we speak with the people that are trading there is that we encourage the takeaways rather than people coming there and dance together like the video I saw. They were dancing in one club with one hand and shouting. I don't think that helps much because the distance is very close. They are dancing together. So those are the things that we'll be looking. And with the regulations, we'll make the input on the regulations, working with those things, limiting umnandi. We work hard that umnandi is there, but not at the expense of health and life. Thank you very much. Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Well, we are responsible for social welfare of South African citizens in general,
And therefore, in a case like this, we still have some citizens who are outside of the country. So we'll be looking out for those who are in distress, working together with the Department of International Relations. There's 4 particular cases of those who could not board the plane. You can imagine the pain and having been left behind. But we are in contact with them. They are in good space, but also we've been in contact with the families of those 4 who were left behind. As a department, we have under us what we call the Disaster Relief Fund, and therefore the announcement that was made therefore enables us to look at what support we need to do in terms of supporting our communities. We do render statutory services such as counseling services to infected and affected persons. We render integration and reunification of the persons who have been isolated or placed under quarantine to prevent stigmatization. And I think that's one of the things that's going to be something that we monitor. When those who have come out of the quarantine, we have to assist them. We also monitor behavioral change of persons declared healthy through the random screening. I think the announcement by the President in relation to schools and the announcement obviously made by the Minister of Basic Education also affects us in one way or the other, because we are also responsible for any childhood development centers, and therefore our centers will have to follow that. And that our starting point this morning with the officials was that they have to take care of themselves first, so that they can be able to render the services to everybody else. So it's important that the health issues which are being raised is not something that they do in the outside. They start that within them. We also have stakeholders who we have to engage, because we've got child and youth care centers, shelters, one-stop centers, treatment centers, and those will be affected all by the President's announcement. We also take care of old age homes and older persons, and we've got non-governmental organizations that we work with, so we have to step up in the communication with them as to what will be expected of them. And then we've got, of course, essential services under SASA. We've got the pay points, and as declared, we must implement the hygienic measures, and we met already this morning, the Department, National Development Agency, and SASA. And we also have to contact and get in touch with all social workers, and we've got a DST command center which will be provided with information and training on COVID-19 to disseminate accurate information to the colleagues at the partner center. And therefore, lastly, also we provide the psychosocial support services where it is needed, because it's part of our responsibility as a department. Lastly, we would like to say that as a Department of Social Development, this is a test for many other issues of hygiene and health. We think that this will be a time for us to step up in our communities, to assist our communities to understand that cleanliness and hygiene is something that government cannot do by making announcements. Our citizens must step up in all our areas. They must step up, because our citizens must also take responsibility here. We're doing the best as government, but they also need to take responsibility and make sure that everything is in order. Schools are going to be closing. One of the important issues is that when schools close, some parents leave their children to run around. It's a time for parents to take responsibility. We know the challenges that some of them won't know what to do because they have to work to go to, but they must take responsibility. We can't have children running around and finding themselves exposed. This is the time when parents need to take responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Soto. Colleagues, as we continue now, let's just ask questions that have not been asked. Because I think we call. Oh, yes. I was supposed to come back to you, Kabase.
Thank you very much. I think in brief, I think one point we need to make very strongly is that the real concept which makes government to take these steps is because we are concerned about particularly the community, particularly the poor, working class, in the townships, in the informal settlements, in the rural areas where resources are scarce, where a lot of services also do get challenged. That's why we have to strengthen the issue of the prevention, because that's the cheapest and the easiest to help to stop the spread of the virus. So we're going to intensify on the communication, reaching out to community leaders, as you have heard, councillors, leaders, churches, and so on. We're meeting the churches on Thursday. We're meeting a number of other leaders, as we indicated. So we're going to keep them partners, go to radio, get the talks on the radio, so that we can reach out to the largest number of people. People must understand and not and so we demystify this virus. So also to use the school teachers teaching the children hygiene and also about the coronavirus. I think the important issue is that the strength of the inequality of our society is probably most visible at this point. But for all the epidemics or outbreaks that we have to deal with, we always find that it's always more resources to deal with in the particularly the rural areas or in poor areas. We've dealt with in the past cholera, we've dealt with malaria and others, which just come from the issue of listeriosis. So the focus on the underprivileged communities is actually the thrust of why we're taking this one. So we will be looking at community health workers and the public works workers to help so that they can help in propagating the information, as well as also assisting in augmenting the tracer teams, so we can have as much information to the communities. We have heard about what we need to do on the taxes, so I think that's the part that for me is actually quite important. The point that has been raised, just to make a specific reference, right now we're dealing with the disaster management. Where we help at most is that it shortens the supply chain management processes and makes it easy for coordination of various departments, and that's why it has been important, because it helps us to be able to divert resources and get actions done in areas where there's need. So when we move out and deal with some of the issues of wiping the use of sanitizers and so on, of course this is not going to happen now. It's something that we're going to be building up on. And when I said that we need to observe in the next couple of weeks, we're going to observe, and then we hope that working together with our people, as long as we've got enough information, we know that our people are going to respond positively. So a question was asked about how many beds do we have. Our figures are that we've got 87,309 beds. 813 of those are ICU in the public sector, and in the private sector, 2,146 beds. 161 of those are ICU beds. We are engaging with the private sector to see where we need to assist each other. I think we need to be aware that right now we really don't have a lot of admissions. We're just talking about getting ready so that once we contain the numbers, we must be ready to admit those and hospitalize them that need to be admitted. The other cases now, the other cases that someone asked about, what about these suspected local transmissions? Those are under investigation, and we will confirm them as soon as we have all the information. For example, one of them is a 3-year-old child, and who's the source, who's linked to a contact, but is trying to establish the exact connection between them. So that's why we're not going to go into more details about it. But it looks like the parent was not unwell. The parent, it was the child, it was unwell, so that's one was tested. So we're trying to establish the link as to where the link is. That one is in KZN. The one in Gauteng, again, was trying to establish the link, because if someone has got a local transmission, we want to try and see whether we can locate where that could have come from. So it's actually already very, very important to focus on that. The issue that we are raising here is that these measures, all of them are really to encourage the community to be working together with us to reduce the spread. And we say we want to flatten the curve. But the numbers that are rising need to slow down. the numbers of people ultimately get to be infected must be less. The level of severity of the disease has to be milder so that we can adequately cope. At the end of the day, at some point, each one of us will have actually had coronavirus, will have breathed it in and out. And so we need to understand that it's going to happen, but what you want to do is to contain it such that it doesn't give an explosion that overwhelms the health services. That is what this is all about. And therefore, community mobilization and getting community to participate is important. So we believe that the best to succeed on this is to ensure that everybody understands and therefore plays their role in the prevention of the infection. So all of these things that we're discussing, a lot of them might be issues that we can never even reach if we're able to get everyone to understand that we need to all participate in the limiting the spread of the infection. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Colleagues, the Minister of Basic Education mistakenly said schools are closing on Tuesday. She has given me a note now that says the correct closure of schools date is Wednesday, the 18th of March, 2020. So we continue, colleagues. We have answered almost all the questions that are going to ask, but nonetheless we will complete. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's it. You repeat. I'm not taking repeaters, please. I am not taking repeaters. Yes? 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 Yes. I'm not taking repeaters. You did ask the question. No, now we are not getting repeaters. Thank you very much. Can we start, Madam?
Thank you very much, Peter, from the Sunday Times. Minister, if you could please perhaps assist as to what is the criteria, if there is a criteria or tipping point that's clearly identified when the state of emergency will be invoked. Minister of Health, is there any way in backup in terms of people who rely on public health care for chronic illnesses as to how they will get medication and how will they be assisted? And the Minister of Home Affairs, is this...
Can we allow you 2 questions? Thank you very much. Next.
CNBC Africa. My question is for the Minister who just departed. I wanted to know if Minister Timamboweni can further elaborate with regards to the consultations they're having with the Financial Services Conduct Authority and banks. And staying on that economic note, I would like to know from Minister Patel if we have already priced in things like excessive pricing. We have seen stocks running low, we have seen prices going up. I just wanted to know if we have a specific excessive pricing number, or is it as time goes? And lastly, from the Minister of Transport.
Thank you very much. Next.
The name is Ahmed Wajah from Radio Islam. I just like to know that is there a difference between 100 people gathering in a workplace compared to 100 people gathering in a place of worship? Because daily prayers taking places at mosques, etc. Will they be allowed to continue if they are under congregants? Another question is with regards to foreign nationals. We have many of them that are currently studying in our country. So will they be allowed visa extensions? And then what about boarding schools?
Next,
For Minister Pando, there are other students who are in other countries that are hard hit, and they have asked if there is an option for them to also be evacuated because they can't afford to come back or do want to come home. Are there any such plans? Thank you.
The question is to the MEC. In terms of the Muslim community...
Which MEC?
MEC, it's very easy.
He is the minister.
Okay. In terms of the Muslim community, what guidelines can he offer on the point of more than 100 congregants coming to the mosque on a daily basis? How should it be regulated And what will happen if people do not abide by this? Will police be, be deployed to enforce the directive from the government in terms of not more than 100 people gathering?
That's right.
Hi, Catherine Chan from Financial Mail. Just a question on children. Was there a lot of discussion about closing schools? They haven't done it in the UK because there's a concern of kids taking the virus home to sick grandparents who have to look after them. What's going to happen to the 20 million school children who get food at school, who might not get food at home, and who often unsupervised in unsafe places? Because we know drownings and abuse and other things happen to children and increase over holidays. So did you weigh up the risk to kids not being in school versus being in school, especially the food?
Next.
Viram Dila from EMCA. My question is around the communities with water cuts, consistent water cuts. How they deal with the issue of washing their hands. And just around hotlines, a lot of people are complaining that they're not working and they're not getting adequate responses. Can you give more clarity on that?
So Hope from the Main Economy newspaper. I just wanted to ask about the interest rates. We're planning to see an interest rate cut, and we've seen that the United States have done that, and so is Australia.
This is Kumala from Tourism Update. My question is to the Minister of Tourism. We just like to get more clarity on the impact of inbound tourism due to the travel restrictions as well as the travel bans. And just in terms of for events and conferences, not national ones like in Gaza, what's going to happen to conferences hosted by various businesses within the sector?
Double Hotline from Manuel. My question goes to DPE, but I don't think the minister's here. But it's to SAA. What does this mean for the stability of the business rescue plan that's currently underway, particularly with all these flights that are being cancelled? And I also wanted to ask the Minister, whether or not you're considering preparing a stimulus package. We're already in a recession, a technical recession at the moment. We have a ratings announcement coming through. We have spoken about an economic slump that will be caused by coronavirus. At what stage will we start considering things like a stimulus package, and what will it consist of, and which sectors will sort of be identified as possible sort of sectors that can be stimulated? Thank you.
I'll start again. The President has asked everyone who has traveled out of the country to these high-risk countries since the middle of February to present themselves for testing. Where and when should these people present themselves, and at whose cost will the test be conducted?
Chibaretlali from ETV. I just want to ask Minister Mkhize as to whether we are still, can be assured that we're still ready, because last month I think said something that we are ready in terms of dealing with the coronavirus. But then I hear a lot of things like the issue of pamphlets to churches and whatnot, which I believe they should have been done maybe 2 weeks ago or since the beginning, so that people can learn and know about the coronavirus. Thank you.
Related to the ETV News, maybe just a quick question as to who will be providing sanitizers, the local taxpayers and of course taxpayers across the country. Thanks.
You are the last one.
So it's one from Newsroom Africa. Just a question, I'm not sure if it's been addressed. How can ordinary people, if they think they could possibly have the virus, be tested?
Excuse me, Minister. We didn't give an answer to the question about the Easter church gatherings. We've got thousands and thousands of people who will be attending. We didn't get an answer to that at all. Thanks.
Colleagues, we know that some of the answers you can't get now, but I think there was a response that there are meetings that will be held with the leaders of the religious sector. But be that as it may, I think you can repeat that, Minister Mtetwa. Colleagues, who starts? Minister Bai.
Thank you very much. There's one question relating to tourism, the impact on tourism. Before the ban, we saw almost some of the establishments sitting at 50%. And as you know, when we address the media or when we did the stakeholder engagement, we projected 3 scenarios for the tourism sector. High impact currently, but recover in the second and third quarter. And that's where we're sitting, and we understand the impact now that when we have these measures, it will reduce the spread, and we are hoping that as it does, we will be able to recover soon. So we are starting to talk about recovery plan. So as Minister Mkhize spoke about flattening the curve, we do support that. And as I said in the morning as well, we had a conversation with members of the sector who said they understand what needs to be done. We're going to take the pain now, but later it will be better. So that's one of the things that has been done. The conferences that we have supported the bidding as the Department of Tourism and through SAT and our bidding bureaus across the provinces. We are currently engaging with those who are organizers or hosters of those conferences to be able to postpone them to later. There are already those that we have lost that we are not able to recover, or we are not able to convince the people to move them later, but many of them we are still in discussion, and as the developments happens, we'll engage the media as well and report them. But there is definitely an impact, and we understand it will be a temporary measure, and it's the pain that as a sector we are prepared to take. We've spoken to them, and we are looking at measures especially to support the SMEs that are in the sector, and we announce that once the measures have been finalized as partnership between government and the business sector. Thank you.
Yes, there's one question about...
Before you, Mr. Domina, okay, take it yes. Continue.
Yes, there's one question about visa extensions, and the study visas were mentioned. Look, there are various types of visas. Study visas, business visas, yeah. We extend them and renew them routinely when it becomes necessary to do so. So I don't think the issue of visas for people who are already studying will be affected in any way, except if the person wants to go home, depending on which country they are going to. Then the normal measures which you have mentioned here will start kicking in. Otherwise, we'll do them in the manner in which we are dealing with renewals and extensions. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Mthembu. As Minister Mkhize had said, and it's what I have also said, that with regard to the issue of the state of emergency, our view is that that will be a very extreme measure which at this stage is not necessary. What I was explaining is the constitutional powers that the President has and Cabinet and the various legislations that we have at our disposal, which we can use from time to time. So at this stage, we are dealing with the state of national disaster, which is what we are emphasizing on and which we are responding to. And the national state of disaster gives us sufficient limitation of the rights that we need to do to be able to help the spread of the disease. And as I've said, I've spoken about Section 36, and the rights that will be limited by the Disaster Management Act and the various legislation, including sports and so forth, include Section 15, the right of freedom of religion, belief and opinion. Section 17, right of assembly, demonstration, picket and petition. Section 18, right to freedom of association. Section 21, right to freedom of movement and residence. Section 22, right to freedom of trade, occupation and profession. Section 24, right to an environment that is not harmful to their well-being. Section 27, right to health care. Section 31, culture.
As read, Minister.
Yeah.
As read.
Those are the Disaster Management Act give us at least the leeway to affect those kind of rights. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister. Panda.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. There was one question which we left out, and that was with respect to China. Clearly, China has made commendable progress through the steps taken by the leadership of the People's Republic of China. Nevertheless, as the government has indicated, in China the situation is not totally clear, hence this reference to high risk. We'll no, it's not going the route as proposed. We do not have a particular area that is an epicenter, hence the measures that are proposed are of general application in the country, but we do recognize the immense steps and the success and achievements that the People's Republic of China has recorded. With respect to students, one of the difficulties that we have confronted, and perhaps Minister Demande will also speak to this, is that many South Africans abroad do not register their presence in the current country at our missions. We've been appealing to all South Africans overseas to approach their local mission and to so that if there is a need for assistance, we know how to reach them and we are able to assist when necessary. The key action at the moment, should you be in an area which is high risk, is to follow the prescripts that those governments have issued, which is self-isolation, and to seek medical assistance if one feels by any means that they may be infected or are exhibiting the symptoms associated with COVID-19. We haven't put any plan in place for any further evacuation at this time, but as I've said, each matter is dealt with in terms of each different situation. And for me, my request is for those who are outside our country, we have put together a command team working through our consular services. We are ready to provide assistance where required, but we need to know who you are, where we can contact you, etc., etc. So we are appealing that you assist us in this regard. With respect to places of worship and particularly with the congregation at mosques in our country, colleagues who posed the question would know that countries other than ourselves have taken measures with respect to mass gatherings and have limited numbers. We could cite Iran, Iraq, many Muslim countries have had to take such steps. We are appealing to us as the public to be the ones who respond to assisting our country not to have a spread. We know that the spread occurs through human contact, and whatever can be done to assist South Africa to limit spread of this particular epidemic, let us do it. It's really an appeal to our people. We don't wish at any point to be calling out mass separation. So I think we call on every institution, on all religious leaders, and this will be repeated in the deliberations on Thursday. But the key issue is all of us can act. And there is no malintention by the government. And I believe that the Ummah, our Muslim community, is able to respond when they're aware that there is a crisis confronting our country. And we expect that kind of response from each of the religious groupings in South Africa. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you. On the question that was put on price, excessive prices and price increases, the consumer and the competition regulators will be on high alert on each of the key areas we're looking at. And we're also going to make a call at NEDLAC this afternoon for business leaders to support our efforts to ensure that we don't have these price rises. The competition laws, of course, have been tightened recently by Parliament. That makes it easier for the regulators to act against excessive pricing. I think my colleague, Minister Pandro, has dealt with the question that was raised about the prayers in the Muslim community. But I should also just indicate that the Muslim Judicial Council's plenary meetings, as are other religious organizations, excuse me,
Did you hear what they said?
What did they say?
Okay, I'll tell you outside.
And as you will know, that in some of these cases, in a number of cases now, masjids are changing even the adhan to say, pray at home. And I think for all churches, all the religious organizations, what it is a call for us to unite and to change behavior to avoid the spread of the virus. Thank you.
Byron?
Just one point, we will station screening, not testing, in all taxi ranks and run on screen. So I said testing, I mistake. So it's screening. Thank you very much.
Minister himself.
No, the question was whether we get those close the schools early. And Chair, I just want to emphasize, which is what we've emphasized, that this is a national disaster. It's not an ordinary action. And that's why we appealed yesterday in cabinet that they must give us 2 days for us to have orderly closures, so that we don't suddenly close, bearing in mind that there will be parents who have their kids in boarding schools and the kids with special needs were in institutions. Therefore, we need at least 2 days for parents and communities to come and collect their kids. And I think as ministers we said that we're expecting everybody to step up, so that the disaster is for all of us and parents have to participate. And Chair, without underestimating the importance of education, we'll be closing for 2 days. Early. Communities were going to take care of their kids next week, from next week. So they'll do that which they always do, in really dealing with holidays. We close for 3 weeks in June, and communities know how to look after their children. So it's not a new thing. In December, they close for 6 weeks. So we expect communities to use the very same coping mechanisms, but in addition, we are asking communities to assist, but there is no way, because we're talking about different matters as the sector in the moment. There's no way we can take care of 12 million kids outside the education system infrastructure. And therefore, we rely on communities and parents in particular to step up and make sure that they work with social development and everybody deal with the disaster. It's a national disaster, so that all of us step up and do something different. But we're not going to do anything different outside what we have. We're not going to do special programs. We're not going to run free kids that we advise. That's not going to work. We've assessed our capacity. It's not going to work. We won't be able to do it. So parents must take that responsibility and communities must assist.
Minister Mthetho.
Chair, the emphasis that this handle affects all our lives, whether it's social, sporting, whatever, but it's not also cash lives. The thing about this handle is that it has to be local South Africans. If it involves foreign people or foreign persons, it will be prohibited. So it's not only on one or two aspects of our life, it's all of them. And it's obvious if you have, for instance, sporting activities, we are not going to have going forward because we have to abide by this very nice house.
Minister of Finance, Babum Moen.
Thank you very much. I suppose that when the pandemic explodes, policymakers are faced with a number of immediate things to deal with, and also the sequencing of policy. So, prevention, and procurement of services, etc. Just be properly sequenced, otherwise you can make very big mistakes. And I think what we're doing here, we're demonstrating our understanding of how to respond to the pandemic and how to sequence the reactions thereof. Let me come to the question about the financial sector. The financial sector, as we know briefly, banking, insurance, and so on. The current immediate challenge globally, not just in South Africa, globally, is the availability of global liquidity. Because if there is global illiquidity, then we have a big problem which will cause market dislocations. Now, one of the most important sources of global liquidity is the US dollar. And the American authorities have already intervened to make sure that the Fed is able to provide about $1.5 trillion of liquidity, which feeds into the global economy and oils the global economy. Second issue we're faced in the financial sector, the market risk which is arising from large reductions or falls in share prices right across the world, which actually in practice means that many people's wealth is being reduced as a result of market developments. People hold bonds and shares and so on. And so Minister Patel and myself will be holding meetings with the leadership of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to see what actions can be done. To see what I don't want to spook the market, but we'll be having discussions with them. Then you've got insurers. Insurers normally have exclusions from pandemics. And this is something that is to be discussed because they will say, for example, that insurance covers don't cater for things like conference cancellations, flight cancellations, and all kinds of exclusions. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to force them to stop the exclusions, but a conversation in a situation like this is necessary so that we're all working together. As far as the banks are concerned, banks, as you know, are critical to our economic system, both in deposit taking and lending. They provide mortgage bonds and other forms of financing. So a conversation needs to be had about what to do in a time of crisis. Let's assume a number of workers are unable to go to work for one reason or the other, but they have a bond with the bank. What does that mean? It's a conversation to be had, not to force ourselves on them, but to say let's have a conversation about all those things. So I think that kind of conversation is necessary. I suppose our primary objective at this moment is that the economy does not grind to a halt. It must continue to operate. Because if the economy grinds to a halt, it means that we have got less tax revenue. Less tax revenue means we're not able to finance all these activities that we want to finance. So whatever we do, let's not panic anybody. Just keep sure that the economy keeps moving so that all these things we want to achieve can be achieved. So somebody said something about the stimulus package. Well, before we get into that, let's get the economy going as it is and move forward. Let's make sure we don't get into a prolonged recession. That's what we need to do by keeping things moving, not panic anybody, write on your pages responsibly. Don't panic the employers to send workers home and so on. Stay calm, but follow the protocols as the minister has indicated. You know, I know some of you think that you can solve all the world's problems by the South African Reserve Bank reducing interest rates. You're wrong. But the South African Reserve Bank, I'm sure, knows its responsibility in times of the pandemic. So don't over-pressurize it. Leave the conversation to me and the governor of the South African Reserve Bank. It's taking place, so don't worry about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think when we end this, we should alert the media that we're not likely to have this size of press conference with so many ministers and so on. What we'll be doing is to just keep updating, and each minister will be able to give us information as it were. But we'd like to appeal to the members of the media. Sometimes it's not easy to resist what sounds like a nice angle, but which may actually create a problem in the way you send the message across. I think it's important for us to know that we need the message to be sent as much as possible to the public in a way that the public is able to look at issues and discuss them and understand what's the information. And I'm raising this just as an observation. Sometimes you have a question of what needs to be done, and you outline the steps. And then after that has been played, you then get so many voice notes and so on coming up to make the issue in the absence of someone who can actually correct them whilst they are happening. So I think we need to try and create that balance as we discuss. The specific question related to chronic medication, part of what we would be working on together with our partners in PEPFAR and other NGOs is to increase the capacity to release stock for longer periods, 3 to 6 months, so that people who are well but our treatment can actually get that treatment if they don't need to see a doctor, then it helps to decongest the hospitals. The point that's been raised by Minister Ramaphosa, I want to endorse. We're not talking about triggering the state of emergency. We're just saying to you that we hope all of these activities are going to work, because if we work together with South Africans, including the media, we should be able to turn this whole situation around. And we're making a point that countries that were able to turn this around started to move early. Now, the other question was raised, and I also want to support the Minister for basic education. The schools were going to close. So it might just be a few more days or weeks, but the point is that the schools were going to close, and it's part of a normal cycle. So the question of what we do is basically taking, adjusting on an existing problem that the children were going to be having anyway. We will therefore be looking at areas where there might be challenges with water. We're aware that there are those kinds of areas. But can we send the message stronger to those who do have water? To say that we are saying that people must actually have the habit of washing their hands. Because quite a lot of people walk into the bathroom, walk out without washing their hands. And the water is there. And so when we problematize the one problem, we need to be aware that the bigger message that needs to go is for those who don't have the problem. And then those who have the problem, we want them to work together to try and solve that problem. We have been, someone asked about the hotline. Let me say that the hotline is actually overworking. At the moment, at some point, they gave us a report of something approaching 100,000 calls in a day, which is the number is so high that some of them are prank calls. And I think we want to discourage people to just want to try and test if it works. And I suspect a lot of media people do that as well. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying we must understand what it does to the system. We'll be trying to open up the system so that we can accommodate more calls. But in this case, there are lots of prank calls which are actually overloading the system, and it's important for us to know when we do that, we're actually taking the space for someone who really needs that to save themselves from the problem. We will be announcing some of the areas where we'll be doing the testing, and as days go by, we need people to be ready so that when we roll it out, then people are aware. But we'll make necessary announcements at the right time. The issue of cost on testing, government doesn't charge for coronavirus testing. Some private sector labs do charge, I know the amounts. But if you choose to go there, you must know you'll pay for it, because that's how it works. But the government doesn't charge. So when government would have done it, government will not charge. Even when we take the specimen from the private sector, validate it, and we don't charge them. And so the problem is really not a question of whether we can afford it or not. Those who can afford it, I'm sure they know that we can go to the private sector. But if you need it, it can actually be done in the public sector without the cost. But what we don't do, we will be focused as to where we do the tests, and therefore we identify the people that we want to test, and so on. So we would like everyone to walk out of here and of this house and say, I also want to get a test. We do have a criteria of being able to do that. The issue around the churches has also been raised. We're going to be discussing with the churches. Government doesn't really want to take decisions for the churches, but obviously this is a national guide, so we're going to engage with them on that particular issue. And I also want to say, we are preempting a rapid rise in the numbers. We haven't reached the point where we're not going to cope. Somebody asked a question, we said we can deal with it. We said, at the moment, we have not even used a small percentage of the beds that we have available. Because a lot of the people who are needing attention don't need to even be admitted. So when we said we're ready, people mustn't say when we're trying to escalate now, the question is, why are you wanting to do that now? Why shouldn't you have done it long ago? But we've been here and talking to the media, explaining the coronavirus. There are a lot of interest, and people are actually understanding what we're discussing. What I think is important for us is to say that we are going to escalate it. We need to actually continue to intensify the communication at that level. But we have not yet come to a point where we will say the system is cracking. The system is not cracking. What we are saying is that this escalates the limitation of conduct, increasing testing, so that the system should never be overwhelmed. When we say we want to flatten the curve. So we need to understand the approach. The approach is saying we want to move ahead of the epidemic so that we are not caught. That's why we're taking the step. But it's not because right now we are caught, right now we are running out short of beds, right now we don't have space for quarantine. No. But we're going to increase the space for quarantine, we're going to increase the beds for dedicated treatment, we're going to increase the capacity for testing, we're going to increase the tracers, we're going to increase communication with community leaders. All of this is to actually make sure that South Africa remains ahead of the curve. That's really the understanding. I think we must keep the balance so that we don't create an impression that already the system is collapsing. It doesn't. And we actually think we want it not to collapse. So all these things that are being put by the minister are to try and move ahead of the process. So we want to really plead with the media to actually continue to work with us to make sure we inform our people properly about this whole situation. As we are here, we just wanted to make sure that media understands as well that we're always ready to engage and to give as much information as possible because you are the best medium for us to be able to communicate with the public. So, but as I've said, we'll just be issuing statements with fewer of us, maybe sometimes not even as many, or sometimes just get statements. When that is the case, this must not create a precedent to say, yeah, but where are the 25 ministers that were supposed to be in the press conference? Let's just understand that I said that in a better way, just to make sure that when we have meetings, we get to expect individual ministers to give information. But thank you very much, colleagues, and thanks to everyone. Once again, we want to say thank you to the media and all the officials who have been part of this whole team. The work continues.
Colleagues, before we close, the President yesterday announced that there will be a formation of a national command council. We want to assure you that that command council has already been appointed by the President. We will circulate a statement from the Presidency which will indicate members of the Coronavirus National Command Council. So work is indeed being done. So at the level of Cabinet, as we have come to brief you, there will be a team that will be seized with this matter led by health. Again, I join the ministers. Thank you very much, ministers, for coming here and further elaborating on what the President said to the nation yesterday. Members of the media, again, thank you very much. As Minister Zolukis has said, you are our medium of communication with the people of South Africa. Let's work together to keep our people informed on this matter. Thank you, and thank you very much. This meeting and this press conference is adjourned until further notice.